to cover, how I consider environmentalism to be a liberal death cult. Well, what's the way that you combat a liberal death cult? Well, with a moderate, not a conservative, you don't want to go the opposite, but with a moderate cult of life, if you will. And it all starts with cosmism, okay? Now, who is Baruch Spinoza? Baruch Spinoza, well, I'm going to read about that in a second. But if you listen to, I think you can still find it on BitChute. You're not going to find it on YouTube. But if you listen to Dr. Pierce's lecture, I believe it's his first lecture on cosmotheism, he points out that Baruch Spinoza was the dude that first started the philosophy that would later be codified by Dr. Pierce into cosmotheism. Okay? So, now, of course, with different, we've had scientific advancements since the time of Spinoza. So, Spinoza was born Baruch Spinoza the 24th of November in 1632 in Amsterdam in the Dutch Republic. He died on the 21st of February, 1677, the Hague, Dutch Republic. Other names, Benedictus de Spinoza. Education, Talmud Torah of Amsterdam, withdrew. University of Leiden, no degree. Era, 17th century, Age of Enlightenment. Region, Western philosophy. Schools, rationalism, Spinozism, Cartesianism, foundationalism, conceptualism, direct realism, correspondence theory of truth, main interests, ethics, epistemology, the Hebrew Bible. And I'm going to get into how to directly put these things to action through things like the 8 laws of health. Okay, notable ideas, Spinoza's philosophical system, Spinozism, Spinozic ethics, Spinoza's theory of emotion, Spinoza's conception of freedom, Spinoza's conception of true religion, immanence, multitude, subspecies, it just goes on and on and on. This guy is a brilliant person. Spinoza was raised in the Spanish-Portuguese Jewish community in Amsterdam. He developed highly controversial ideas regarding the authenticity of the Hebrew Bible and the nature of the divine Jewish religious authorities. Jewish religious authorities issued what's called harem against him, causing him to be effectively expelled and shunned by the Jewish society at age 23, including by his own family. So when people get all hot and bothered that Mormons shun people, or hot and bothered that Scientologists shun people, please take note that other religions shun people too, such as Judaism, Catholicism, the Amish. They shun people also. There's no need to get hot and bothered. This is a common feature in mainstream religion. So shortly after his death, his books were added to the Catholic Church's Index of Forbidden Books. That always is a sign that somebody's worthwhile if their books have been added to the Index of Forbidden Books by the Catholic Church. You know they're a decent person, because clearly their books wouldn't be added to it if they were an indecent person like most Catholic priests. Okay, so, although nowhere in his work does Spinoza argue against the existence of God, he does not. In fact, Spinoza proves the existence of God, and I'm going to get into that. Spinoza lived an outwardly simple life as an optical lens grinder, collaborating on microscope and telescope lens designs with whoever this dude is. He turned down rewards and honors throughout his life, including prestigious teaching positions. He died at the age of 44 in 1677 from a lung illness, perhaps tuberculosis or silicosis, exasperated by inhalation of fine glass dust while grinding lenses. He is buried in the Christian churchyard of wherever the heck that is, in the Hague. Spinoza's magnum opus, The Ethics, was published posthumously in the year of his death. The work opposed Descartes' philosophy of mind-body dualism and earned Spinoza recognition as one of Western philosophy's most important thinkers. In it, Spinoza wrote the last indisputable Latin masterpiece, and one in which the refined conceptions of medieval philosophy are finely tuned against themselves and destroyed entirely, Hegel said. The fact is that Spinoza is made a testing point in modern philosophy, so that it may really be said you are either a Spinozist or not a philosopher at all. His philosophical accomplishments and moral character prompted Gilles Deleuze to name him the Prince of Philosophers. I'm not going to get into all this. I will get into Spinozism quickly, though. So the background of Spinozism is in Protestant Reformationism, Counter-Reformationism, Aristotelianism, Scholasticism, and patristics, which I don't know what that is. I'll have to look that up in a bit. Early in the Ethics, Spinoza argues that there is only one substance which is absolutely infinite, self-caused, and eternal. This is what in magic, if you practice occultism, is referred to as the bornless one, the true God, if you will, the one true God, or what in, say, the master key system is called the universal mind, okay, which is, it's absolutely infinite and self-caused. Substance causes an infinite number of attributes, the intellect perceiving an abstract concept or essence and modes, things following form, attributes, and modes. He calls this substance God or nature. In fact, he takes these two terms to be synonymous, meaning God and nature. Dios sive natura. So during his time, this statement was seen as literally equating the existing world with God, for which he was accused of atheism. One should, however, remember the neutral monist position. While the natural universe humans experience in the realm of mind and physical reality is part of God, it is only two attributes, thought and extension, that are part of infinite attributes emanating from God. His philosophy was part of the philosophic debate in Europe during the Enlightenment, along with Cartesianism. Specifically, Spinoza disagreed with Descartes on substance duality. Descartes' views on the will and the intellect and the subject of free will. Spinozism, the concept of personal relationship with God, comes from the position that one is part of an infinite interdependent organism. Spinoza argued that everything is derivative of God, interconnected with all of existence. Although humans experience only thought and extension, what happens to one aspect of existence will affect others. Thus, Spinozism teaches a form of determinism and ecology, and uses these as a basis for morality. Additionally, a core doctrine of Spinozism is that the universe is essentially deterministic. All that happens or will happen could not have unfolded in any other way. Spinoza claimed that the third kind of knowledge, intuition, is the highest kind. More specifically, he defined intuition as the ability of the human intellect to intuit knowledge based upon its accumulated understanding of the world. This means essentially that substance is just whatever can be thought of without relating it to any other idea or thing. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So, being a Boy Scout, or a former Boy Scout, I should say, I was basically introduced to the concept of the Great Spirit, or Wakantanka, which is the Lakota version of the Judeo-Christian God Yahweh, but it's a much better interpretation of Yahweh. It's a more naturalistic interpretation, more Spinozic, if you will. So the Great Spirit is a concept of the life force, a supreme being or God known more specifically as Wakantanka in Lakota, Gitichi Manatu in Algonquin, and by other specific names in a number of Native American and First Nations cultures. While the concept is common to a number of indigenous cultures in the United States and Canada, it is not shared by all cultures or necessarily interpreted in the same way. According to Lakota activist Russell Means, a more semantically accurate translation of Wakantanka is the Great Mystery. Due to perceived similarities between the Great Spirit and the Christian concept of God, colonial European missionaries frequently used such existing beliefs as a means of introducing indigenous Americans to Christianity and encouraging conversion. The Great Spirit has at times been conceptualized as an anthropomorphic celestial being. That's not the interpretation that I think is appropriate, however. A God of creation, history, and eternity who also takes a personal interest in world affairs and might regularly intervene in the lives of human beings. Numerous individuals are held to have been speakers for the Great Spirit, persons believed to serve as an earthly mediator responsible for facilitating communication between humans and the supernatural. More generally, such a speaker is generally considered to have an obligation to preserve the spiritual traditions of their respective lineage. The Great Spirit is looked to by spiritual leaders for guidance by individuals as well as communities at large. While belief in an entity or entities known as the Great Spirit exists across numerous indigenous American peoples, individual tribes often demonstrate varying degrees of cultural divergence. As such, a variety of stories, parables, fables, and messages exhibiting different, sometimes extraordinary themes and plot elements have been attributed to the same figure by otherwise disparate cultures. Now, you have to understand, this Great Spirit, if you will, has many different names throughout many different cultures, including, for example, the Egyptian Aten, the Greek the quintessentiality of the ancient Greeks, the Greek philosophers. There's the Tao in Taoism, the Brahman in Hinduism. So this is a concept that is cross-cultural. Monism or monotheism or pantheistic monism. This is not unique to the Native Americans. So Wakantanka can be interpreted as the power of this or sacredness that resides in everything. So remember that, just like Spinoza's concept of God, Wakantanka can be interpreted as the power or sacredness which resides in everything. Resembling some animistic and pantheistic beliefs, this term describes every creature and object as Wakan, or holy, or having aspects that are Wakan, or holy. The element Tanka corresponds to great or large, so it would mean great holy. Prior to Christianization of indigenous Americans by European settlers and missionaries, the Lakota used Wakantanka to see, this is important to understand. Remember, I said Wakantanka is currently a Native American interpretation of the Christian concept of God. And you will see why I say that, because originally it was used to refer to a group or an organization of various entities. So this is Manatu, who is another name for the Great Spirit, is perceived as the spiritual and fundamental life force by the Algonquin people. It is believed by practitioners to be omnipresent, manifesting in all things, including organisms, the environment, and events, just like Spinoza's interpretation of God, and events both human, induced, and otherwise. Manifestations of Manitou are also believed to be dualistic, and such contrasting, so this is similar to the Tao in some ways. Instances are known as Asha Monatu, good spirit, and Ochimonati, bad spirit, respectively. According to legend, when the world was created, the great spirit Asa, or Asha Monatu, gave the land to the indigenous people, the Shawnee in particular. Gichi Manatu, okay, we're getting off track here. So, contemporary religious significance. This is important because this brings up the Native American Church of North America. The contemporary belief in the Great Spirit is generally associated with the Native American Church. The doctrine regarding the Great Spirit within this modern tradition is quite varied and generally takes on the Christian ideas of a monotheistic God alongside animistic conceptions. The number of adherents to these contemporary beliefs in the Great Spirit are unknown, but it is likely they number over 250,000 people. So what are the basic beliefs of scientific pantheism? Nature. When we say we revere the earth, we mean it with just as much commitment and reverence as believers speaking about their invisible God or gods, but we are not talking about supernatural powers or beings. The universe. When we say we revere the universe, we are not talking about this supernatural being because we do not believe in supernatural beings. We are talking about the way our senses and our emotions force us to respond to the overwhelming mystery. Now, I used to be a straight-up scientific pantheist, meaning I believed in scientific pantheism, until I was brought back to a semi-spiritual type conception by the writings of Ellen G. White, and I'll get into that later. But what exactly is eco-spirituality? Eco-spirituality connects the science of ecology with spirituality. It brings together religion and environmental activism. Eco-spirituality has been defined as a manifestation of the spiritual connection between human beings and the environment. The new millennium and the modern ecological crisis has created blah, blah, blah. Proponents may come from a range of faiths. And this is, I believe that pantheism is the universal groundwork. This one true God, nature, is the universal God. Okay, so people might come from Islam, Jainism, Christianity, Catholicism, Evangelism, Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. Okay, or any number of indigenous religions. Eco-spirituality has been influenced by the ideas of deep ecology. Origins. Eco-spirituality finds its history in the relationship between spirituality and the environment. I believe that, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, the true birth of eco-spirituality in the modern sense comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson, the philosopher that founded New England Transcendentalism, and the Unitarian Universalist Church that he was a preacher in. So what's eco-psychology? Eco-psychology is an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary field that focuses on the synthesis of ecology and psychology. This is what we have to understand. We are animals. We are programmed to live in nature. That's the truth, okay? History, blah, blah, blah. Not getting into all this. That's not important. Beliefs. Okay, fundamental principles. There is a synergistic interplay between the earth and personal well-being. And the whole universe, for that matter. There's an interplay between the universe and the human organism, and that needs to be understood. The core of the mind is the ecological unconscious. The core of eco-psychology is to awaken the inherent sense of environmental reciprocity that lies within the ecological unconscious. The contents of the ecological unconscious represent the living record of evolution. The crucial stage of development is the life of the child. The ecological ego matures toward a sense of ethical responsibility with the planet. Whatever contributes to small-scale social forms and personal empowerment nourish the ecological ego. So these are the 12 commandments of the Great Spirit from the Gospel of the Red Man. So 1, there is but one Great Spirit. He is eternal, omnipotent, omnipotent, invisible. He pervades all things. It should say it pervades all things, but this is before, before we started using things that make more sense. Because you have to understand, if he pervades all things, he has to also be a she. So that's the whole point with the concept of God. When you start accepting God as everything, you have to understand that God is not a he or a she. Number 2, thou shalt not make a likeness of the Great Spirit or portray him as a visible being, although you can depict the thunderbird, which is a symbol of the Great Spirit. 3, hold thy word of honor sacred. Lying is at all times shameful, for the Great Spirit is everywhere all the time. 4, thou shalt keep the feasts, learn the dances, respect the taboos, and observe the customs of your tribe. Okay, for us, that would be our traditions. If you would be a good member of the community and profit by its strength, for these things are the wisdom of the ancients and your fathers in the long ago. So keep in mind, for us, for American whites, this would be the traditions of our founders, the traditions of the pioneers, the traditions of the people that made this nation possible. Okay. 5, honor and obey thy father and thy mother. 6, thou shalt not commit murder. 7, be chaste in thought and deed according to the highest standard of your tribe. 8, thou shalt not steal. 9, be not greedy of great riches. It is a shame and a sin of all worthiness in a man to have great possessions when there be those of his tribe who are in want. 10, touch not the poisonous firewater, meaning don't drink alcohol that robs you of your strength and makes wise men turn into fools. Touch not nor taste any food or drink that robs the body of its power, meaning don't use drugs and alcohol, okay, and don't eat crap food. 11, be clean, both yourself and the place in which you dwell. 12, love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life, glory in your strength and beauty, rejoice in the fullness of your aliveness, seek to make your life long and full of service to your people, and prepare a noble death song for the day when you are about to cross the great divide. So I'm going to get into, in the next video, I'm going to get into how to come to a greater understanding of God and your purpose and your place in the universe and whatnot, by obeying things like the 8 laws of health. But first, before I go to the next video, I'm going to cover it briefly here. The Bible is actually a wealth of information, parables mostly and things of that nature, that play an important role. A lot of the Bible is based obviously on naturalistic observation. It's funny because there's a gentleman named Walter Veith, who is a zoologist that converted to Seventh-day Adventism after beholding the health message and realizing, oh, what do you know? The health message makes scientific sense. And the health message is based in the Bible, and he made the radical leap and said the Bible must be true. I don't go that far. I believe the Bible, parts of the Bible are true. Most of it's in parable. But I believe that this is true universally, and I can show universally where these things appear in other religions. And it's not because these religions are all from the same source, although they do all come from God, God being nature, and they come from people that have observed nature and observed what benefits the human organism and what takes away from the human organism. So what I would say is, in a way, what you can say is the light of God is health and happiness. Anything that takes you away from the light of God, anything that takes you away from health and happiness is sin. Okay? So What is the Genesis diet? Well, God in his wisdom, or nature in its wisdom, has made life worth living for human beings, life without pain and sickness. This is life where death is a true and painless transition from one realm to another, yada yada. The Genesis 1:29 diet, is as given by God, is meant to nourish human beings. Now what you'll notice, the diet given by God, in heavy quotations, in Genesis is very similar to how our chimpanzee cousins eat, our bonobo cousins eat, and how our hunter-gatherer ancestors eat. The ones that are still with us, that still live as hunter-gatherers, very few do, but also the way subsistence gardeners live and things of that nature. So, okay, Genesis, okay, in one, this is a diet that God gave to mankind for nourishment from the beginning. Hunger is commonplace. Let's get into the diet here. Oh, I guess it doesn't cover the diet. I guess I'll move on to something that covers the diet.